Hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we are going to tell you the incredible, shocking, and dramatic story of Pablo Escobar. Don't worry, this story will be simple, clear, and easy to follow. Perfect for English learners. So, sit back, relax, and let's begin our journey into the world of Pablo Escobar. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was born on December 1st, 1949, in a small town called Rio Negro, Colombia. His father was a farmer, and his mother was a schoolteacher. They didn't have much money, but they worked hard. From a young age, Pablo was not like other kids. He was smart, yes, but not in the traditional way. He was clever, ambitious, and always thinking about how to get more. Some people said that even as a boy, Pablo wanted to be rich, powerful, and famous. When Pablo was young, he moved with his family to Medellin, a big city in Colombia. Life in Medellin was tough. There was poverty, crime, and violence everywhere. Pablo saw rich people driving expensive cars and living in big houses. He wanted that life, but he didn't want to wait. As a teenager, Pablo started small. Some stories say that he began by stealing gravestones from cemeteries and selling them to smugglers. Others say he sold fake diplomas or small amounts of contraband, like cigarettes. But one thing is clear: Pablo had a gift for business, especially illegal business. He knew how to make money, how to take risks, and how to stay one step ahead of the police. By the time he was in his early 20s, Pablo was already involved in bigger crimes. He and his friends would steal cars and sell them. Soon, he became known in Medellin's underworld as a young man with ambition, courage, and no fear. Even in those early days, Pablo told his friends something shocking. He said, "I want to be president of Colombia, or I will be the richest man in Colombia." It sounded crazy. How could a poor boy with no connections, no education, and no power dream so big? But Pablo was not joking. He believed in himself, and he was ready to do anything to make his dream come true. This was just the beginning. Soon, Pablo Escobar would discover a new business, one that would change his life forever, and also change the history of Colombia and the world. In the 1970s, something new and very powerful appeared in the world of crime: cocaine. At first, it was not well known outside of South America. But soon, in places like the United States, cocaine became a party drug for rich people. The demand for it grew fast, and where there is demand, there is opportunity. Pablo Escobar saw this opportunity very clearly. He understood that cocaine was small, easy to transport, and could make unbelievable amounts of money. 1 kilo of cocaine in Colombia was cheap, but in the United States, it could sell for 10, 20, or even 30 times more. Pablo realized this was the future. He began working with small groups of smugglers. At first, they used simple methods, hiding cocaine inside suitcases or sending it by plane with people pretending to be tourists. But Pablo was ambitious. He didn't want to stay small. He wanted to dominate the entire business. Pablo had a special talent. He was both a businessman and a gangster. On one side, he was clever, strategic, and organized. On the other side, he was ruthless, violent, and willing to do anything to protect his business. This combination made him very dangerous and very successful. By the mid-1970s, Pablo formed partnerships with other traffickers. Together, they created the Medellin cartel. This was not just a group of criminals. It was an empire in the making. They controlled production, transportation, and distribution of cocaine. From the jungles of Colombia to the streets of Miami and New York, Pablo's hand was everywhere. How did they move the drugs? Pablo and his partners used creativity and courage. They bought airplanes, helicopters, and even built hidden landing strips in the jungle. Some planes were so full of cocaine that they could barely take off. Later, they even used submarines and boats. One of Pablo's favorite tricks was bribery. He believed in the idea of plata o plomo, which means silver or lead. In other words, take my money as a bribe, or take my bullets and die. Most people chose the money, but those who refused often paid with their lives. With this brutal system, Pablo's cartel grew stronger and stronger. Judges, police officers, politicians, and even soldiers, many of them were on his payroll. Those who were not could be threatened or eliminated. Pablo's wealth grew at an unbelievable speed. By the late 1970s, he was making millions of dollars every week. At one point, it is said that the Medellin cartel controlled 80% of the world's cocaine trade. That made Pablo Escobar one of the richest men alive. But Pablo was not only a drug trafficker. He wanted to be seen as a kind of Robin Hood. In Medellin, he built houses for the poor, football fields for children, and gave money to families who had nothing. For the poor neighborhoods, Pablo was a hero. People loved him, protected him, and called him Don Pablo. This was part of his strategy. By helping the poor, he built loyalty. If the police came looking for him, the people would protect him, hide him, and even fight for him. Pablo understood the power of both fear and love, and he used both perfectly. But not everyone saw him as a hero. The Colombian government, the United States, and many ordinary citizens saw him for what he really was: a dangerous criminal who was poisoning the world with drugs and bringing violence to Colombia. Still, in the late 1970s and early 1980s, Pablo felt untouchable. He was richer than ever, more powerful than most politicians, and admired by thousands of people. He started to dream even bigger. Money was not enough anymore. Now, he wanted respect, status, and maybe even political power. In 1982, Pablo Escobar took a shocking step. He entered politics. He ran for a seat in the Colombian Congress. Many people laughed at the idea of a drug trafficker becoming a politician. But Pablo was smart. He used his wealth to gain support, and his image as a man of the people helped him win. He actually became a member of the Colombian parliament. For a moment, it looked like Pablo's dream was coming true. He was no longer just a drug lord. He was a respected politician, shaking hands with leaders, speaking in public, and pretending to be a normal businessman. But his enemies were watching. Journalists began to investigate him, and rival politicians started to expose his past. Soon, the truth about his drug empire could no longer be hidden. Pablo's dream of becoming president collapsed. Instead of gaining respect, he gained more enemies. And yet, Pablo was not afraid. He still had money, soldiers, and an empire of cocaine. If politics would not give him power, then violence would. By the early 1980s, Pablo Escobar was no longer just a criminal. He was an international kingpin. His Medellin cartel controlled the cocaine trade like no other organization in history. Cocaine was flowing from Colombia to the United States, to Europe, and even to Asia. And with every shipment, Pablo's fortune grew. It is said that at his peak, Pablo Escobar was earning more than $70 million every single day. That is an amount so huge that it is almost impossible to imagine. His total wealth reached an estimated $30 billion, making him one of the richest men on earth. But what do you do with so much money? Pablo's answer was simple: spend it, hide it, and show it off. He bought enormous pieces of land, including a gigantic estate called Hacienda Napoles. This was not just a house. It was a paradise. It had a private zoo with elephants, giraffes, hippos, and exotic birds. It had lakes, swimming pools, a private airport, and even a collection of classic cars and motorcycles. For his children, Hacienda Napoles was like Disneyland. For Pablo, it was a symbol of power. He would invite politicians, celebrities, and even foreign visitors to show them how rich and untouchable he was. But money also brought problems. The Medellin cartel made so much cash that they couldn't even count it properly. Imagine having so many dollar bills that you don't know where to put them. Pablo and his men stored the money in warehouses, hidden rooms, and even buried it underground. In fact, Pablo's brother, Roberto Escobar, once said that the cartel spent over $2,000 a month just on rubber bands to wrap stacks of cash. Even more unbelievable, rats would sometimes eat the stored money, and millions of dollars would rot away. But for Pablo, it didn't matter. There was always more coming in. Pablo's wealth allowed him to buy almost anything: cars, airplanes, art, even politicians. He paid off police officers, judges, and government officials so they would ignore his business. If bribery didn't work, he used fear. Remember his rule: plata o plomo, silver or lead. Take the bribe or take the bullet. This philosophy made the Medellin cartel both powerful and terrifying. Anyone who stood in their way was either paid off or killed. Journalists, judges, politicians, many were assassinated. For the people of Colombia, life became dangerous and uncertain. Yet, in the poor neighborhoods of Medellin, Pablo was still a hero. He built housing projects, schools, and football fields. He gave money to the poor, handed out gifts at Christmas, and helped families who had no food. To many, he was not just a drug lord, he was a savior. Children in Medellin dreamed of being like Don Pablo. His name was spoken with respect and even love. When the police tried to hunt him, the people protected him. They warned him about raids, hid him in their homes, and sometimes even fought against the authorities. This Robin Hood image gave Pablo a special kind of power, something that no amount of money could buy. He controlled not only the cocaine business, but also the hearts and minds of many Colombians. But outside of Colombia, the picture was very different. In the United States, cocaine was becoming a crisis. Thousands of people were addicted. Violence between drug gangs was rising in American cities. The U.S. government blamed Pablo Escobar and his cartel. They demanded that Colombia do something about him. This created a dangerous situation. The Colombian government was caught between two forces: the power of Escobar and the pressure of the United States. On one hand, Escobar's money was everywhere: bribes, donations, and investments. On the other hand, the U.S. was threatening to cut ties if Colombia didn't act. Meanwhile, Pablo's own behavior was becoming bolder. He traveled with convoys of cars, guarded by heavily armed men. He built secret labs deep in the jungle to produce cocaine in massive amounts. He even bought entire neighborhoods to keep people loyal to him. Stories from this time show just how extreme Pablo's life had become. For example, when his daughter once felt cold, Pablo burned stacks of dollar bills in the fireplace just to keep her warm. Imagine having so much money that you can literally use it as firewood. But power always creates enemies. By the late 1980s, Pablo was no longer just a criminal in hiding. He was the center of attention worldwide. Governments wanted him arrested, rival cartels wanted his empire, and Colombian elites wanted him destroyed. Pablo believed he was untouchable. But the truth was, his empire had grown so big that it was impossible to hide forever. And soon, The war against Pablo Escobar would begin, a war that would turn Colombia into one of the most violent places on earth. By the late 1980s, Pablo Escobar was at the peak of his power. He was one of the richest men alive, controlling most of the cocaine that entered the United States and Europe. But with this power came a storm of enemies: the Colombian government, the United States, rival cartels, and even parts of Colombian society that were tired of living in fear. The first major problem for Escobar was extradition. The United States wanted Colombian drug lords to be sent to America to face trial. For Pablo, this was his worst nightmare. In Colombia, he could bribe judges, threaten politicians, or hide in the mountains. But in the United States, he would have no power, no friends, and no way out. So he made a decision. He would fight against extradition with everything he had. His slogan became famous: "We prefer a grave in Colombia to a prison in the United States." Pablo declared war, not just on the government, but on anyone who supported extradition. Judges who signed extradition orders were assassinated. Politicians who spoke against him were killed. Even journalists who wrote about him became targets. Colombia entered a dark period of terror. Bombings, shootings, kidnappings. It became part of everyday life. Escobar's men placed bombs in airplanes, shopping centers, and government buildings. Hundreds of innocent people died in attacks meant to send one message: do not challenge Pablo Escobar. One of the most shocking acts was the 1989 bombing of Avianca Flight 203. Escobar's men placed a bomb on a passenger plane, trying to kill a political rival. The plane exploded in the air, killing all 107 people on board. The entire world was horrified. For many Colombians, this was the moment when they realized Escobar would do anything, even mass murder, to protect himself. In the same year, another tragedy struck. A bomb exploded at the headquarters of the Colombian secret police in Bogotá, killing dozens and injuring hundreds. Escobar's war was no longer just against individuals. It was against the state itself. But Escobar's strategy was not only fear. He also used kidnapping as a weapon. He ordered his men to kidnap the children of politicians and elites, forcing the government to negotiate with him. Families lived in terror, knowing that no one was safe from Pablo's reach. Meanwhile, the U.S. government increased its pressure. They sent advisors, money, and intelligence to help Colombia fight the cartels. For the first time, Escobar felt the power of an enemy that could not be bribed or intimidated. At the same time, Escobar faced enemies from within Colombia itself. Rival groups of traffickers, especially the Cali cartel, saw an opportunity to weaken him. They hated Escobar's violent methods because his attacks brought too much attention from the police and the United States. The Cali cartel preferred to be quiet and strategic, but Escobar's bombs were ruining their business. So, rivals began to secretly support the government in its fight against him. A special group called Los Peeps, people persecuted by Pablo Escobar, was formed. This group, made up of rival criminals and vigilantes, hunted Escobar's men, killed his associates, and destroyed his property. In the middle of this chaos, Pablo tried to make a surprising move. He offered to surrender, but only under his own conditions. He told the Colombian government he would go to prison if they promised not to extradite him to the United States. And shockingly, the government agreed. But Pablo's prison was not a normal prison. It was a luxury fortress that he built himself, called La Catedral. Inside, he had a football field, a bar, a waterfall, and even a jacuzzi. He continued to run his cartel from behind the prison walls, meeting with associates, ordering murders, and living like a king. The situation was a joke for Colombians. The most powerful criminal in the country was in prison, but in reality, he was still in control. Eventually, international pressure forced the government to act. They decided to transfer Escobar to a real prison. When Pablo heard about this plan, he did not wait. In 1992, he simply walked out of La Catedral and escaped. Once again, he was free, and once again, Colombia was thrown into fear. Now the war entered its final and bloodiest stage. Escobar was hunted by everyone. The Colombian police, the US DEA, rival cartels, and Los Peeps. He moved constantly, hiding in safe houses, communicating through secret phones, and trusting only a small circle of men. But no matter how powerful he had been, the walls were closing in. His empire was shrinking. His allies were abandoning him. His money was harder to move, and the world was determined to bring him down. By 1992, Pablo Escobar was no longer the king of Medellin. He was a fugitive, moving from one hiding place to another. The Colombian government, helped by the United States and rival groups like Los Peeps, was closing in on him. For years, Pablo had lived like a god, untouchable, adored by many, feared by all. But now, his empire was crumbling. Many of his closest allies were dead, arrested, or had betrayed him. His vast fortune was harder to use, because banks and businesses were under pressure not to work with him. Even his loyal soldiers began to lose faith. Escobar still tried to maintain his family life. He loved his wife, Maria Victoria, and his two children, Juan Pablo and Manuela. From hiding, he made phone calls to them, sometimes for hours, even though he knew the government was listening. For Pablo, family was his last connection to a normal life. But those calls were also his weakness. The hunt for Escobar became one of the largest manhunts in history. A special Colombian unit called the Search Block, trained with American help, used technology to track his phone calls. Each time he spoke with his family, they got closer to finding him. On December 2nd, 1993, the hunt finally ended. Escobar made a phone call to his son that lasted too long. The search block traced the call to a middle-class neighborhood in Medellin. Soldiers surrounded the house where Pablo was hiding. When the soldiers broke in, Escobar tried to escape across the rooftops. A gunfight broke out. Escobar was armed with 2 pistols, but he was outnumbered and surrounded. Moments later, he was shot and killed. The image of Pablo's lifeless body on the rooftops spread around the world. For some, it was a moment of justice. For others, especially the poor people of Medellin who had admired him, it was a tragedy. Thousands attended his funeral, crying and shouting his name. Even in death, Escobar divided Colombia, hero to some, monster to others. But what was Pablo Escobar really? A hero who gave to the poor, or a criminal who destroyed lives? The truth is complicated. Yes, Escobar built houses, schools, and football fields. Yes, he gave money to the poor and helped families in need. But at the same time, he killed thousands of people, spread fear across an entire country, and created a cocaine empire that hurt millions worldwide. Escobar showed how money and power can corrupt a nation. He bought judges, police officers, and even politicians. He proved that fear can control people just as much as love. His life is a lesson in both ambition and destruction. Even today, decades after his death, Pablo Escobar remains a symbol. His name appears in books, movies, and TV shows. Some people admire his boldness, his ability to rise from poverty to unimaginable wealth. Others remember the blood, the bombs, and the tears he caused. Colombia has worked hard to move beyond Escobar's shadow. Medellin, once the most dangerous city in the world, is now a place of culture, innovation, and hope. But the memory of Pablo Escobar is still there, a reminder of how one man changed a country forever. And that brings us to the end of this incredible story. From a poor boy in Rio Negro, to the king of cocaine, to a hunted fugitive dying on a rooftop, Pablo Escobar's life was like a movie, full of ambition, power, and tragedy. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more easy, powerful stories in English. Your support helps us bring you more content, and it keeps our community growing. So what do you think about Pablo Escobar? Was he a hero, a villain, or something in between? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.